Well, good afternoon. My name is Joey O'Connor with the Grove Center for the Arts and Media, and I want to thank you for joining me on this Facebook Live episode. It's fresh from the Grove, and I'm so glad to be with you today. And so as people are coming online, I'm going to just give you some introductory thoughts about what we're talking about. Today we're covering this really important subject called Cultivating a Rich Emotional Landscape. And I'm going to be talking about, as artists, the big impact that emotions play in all of our lives. Our emotions are this incredible instrument panel on our heart that let us know how we're doing throughout the day. And it's so critical that we understand how these emotions play a role in our life, in our relationships, in our art, in our creativity. And so that's what we're going to be covering today. If you've never signed on for the Grove Center for the Arts and Media Facebook Live, I'm really glad that you're here with us today. If you're listening to the replay, I would love to hear from you. You can also post the comments, which are going to be on our Grove website. But as we're talking today, and as I share some insights, I'm really looking forward to have a conversation with you and how we can learn from one another, what we can understand more about our emotions and the impact, the role that they play in our lives. And so I really look forward to your input, your feedback. Let me know where you're coming from. If you do find that you are enjoying the content today, I'd like to ask you to hit the like button, share it with a friend. That's how we get the word out about these free resources that we give out to artists. Also, I'm going to post a free gift for you. If you haven't picked up our Cultivating Your Spiritual Life and Creative Work, it's a free video course with the Grove. I really hope that you'll pick up your copy today. It's a free video course. I think you'll really enjoy it. It'll encourage you. So as people are coming on today, it's a great opportunity to really look at your emotional life and the impact that it plays. So let me get started. I was reading a book that I began about a month ago, and I was on Amazon, and you know how Amazon gives you these suggested book titles and a whole slew of different things you can order. Well, I typically don't always buy these recommended book titles. I hop on Amazon, get the book that I want, get off, just buy it now. But I looked at this one title and it really caught my attention. The book's called Why Do I Do That? And I went, oh, I could ask myself that question often. But then I looked at it in more detail, looked at the subtitle. It's written by an author named Joseph Burgo. And the subtitle is Psychological Defense Mechanisms and the Hidden Ways that They Shape Our Lives. So I said, that looks pretty interesting. And I didn't think a whole lot about it, but I thought I'd order the book. So I ordered the book and I started reading it. And Joseph Burgo, he's a professional therapist, he's a counselor, but he really looks at this idea of the whole panel of our emotions in our heart and lives. And he begins with the question that people often ask, do you want to be happy? And most people say, yes, of course I want to be happy. And as he gets into the book, he brings up this idea that most people want to be happy, but emotions are far much more than just happiness. And so he posed the questions, do you want to be happy, or do you want a rich emotional landscape for your life? And so I looked at that, and it made me think about, for many of you, you've heard me talk about how with the Grove we focus on cultivating our spiritual lives and our creative work as artists here at the Grove. And we really look at these different aspects in our lives that are all about wholeness and what does it mean to cultivate wholeness in our life. I've talked about our cultivated artist experience and how we work with artists over the course of a year to go on this journey of wholeness. And what are all the dimensions of human personality in our lives? Well, emotions are a huge part of that. So it really got me thinking over the past month, man, this would be a great topic to share with you on Facebook Live here and with the artists that we know, of looking at this issue. What does it mean to cultivate a rich emotional landscape for your life? And it got me thinking about the arts. And maybe some of you read the most recent blog post that I sent out yesterday on the Grove's blog. But I teed up this idea of, if I gave you one color to paint with, say yellow or black, you can mix it in with no other colors. There could be no shading. You just have to paint with that one color. Or if you had a piano before you and I said, okay, we'll play a song, but you get to pick one note, only one key on that piano. And in the same way, if you were shooting photography and I gave you one subject, say buildings to shoot, that would be it. Well, as a writer and a filmmaker, if people only gave me one subject or one thing or one word to write about, that would be ridiculous. Well, in the same way, when people say, I want to be happy, that's my goal in life, to be happy, that's one emotion. It's not this rich emotional landscape of all the emotions that we're talking about for our lives. So today I'm going to explore the good emotions and the difficult emotions that make up the course of our lives. And if you're just coming online now, let me know where you're coming from. I'd love to hear where you're coming from. If you've got a comment or question, throw that out there. We'd love to make this as interactive as possible. So continuing on, let me talk about our emotions. And I'll start with a question for you. What are the emotions that are most common to your experience? Are they the good emotions that are associated with joy and happiness and gratitude, thanksgiving, a feeling of elation or meaning or purpose in your life? What are those emotions? Laughter, the emotions that are common to your experience, that are those feel-good emotions, the emotions that, when we listen to the favorite music that we like, that we feel good, we're in a good mood, and we're having a good day. So what are those emotions come to your experience? Now, on the flip side of that, what are the emotions that are most difficult in your experience? Do you wrestle with fear or anxiety? Do you wrestle with doubt or feeling insecure? Do you wrestle with depression or loneliness? Any of those different ongoing darker emotions that we really want to stay away from, because those are the things that lead to us to being in a bad mood or lead us to feeling depressed or discouraged, weighted down, and burdened. So what are the emotions really most common to your experience? What are those emotions that you keep circling back to again and again? I'd love your feedback as you're listening to this, as you're checking this out. We've got a lot to talk about today. So with that, what I have found in my work, both in ministry over the past 25 years, some of you know because I did a Facebook Live session on grief, a whole episode on grief. But for about 10 years, I worked with individuals and families who were going through major grief experiences after experiencing divorce, death, major job loss, relationship loss, people dealing with all kinds of loss over the course of their lives. And it was usually that most, really what we call a life-limiting loss that, sent them into this despair and grief. And so I'd be with people from 8 weeks to 10 weeks at a time, taking them through a class that really dealt with these difficult emotions. And through that experience, what my goal is, and one of my goals is with you today, is to really help you understand that your emotions are not your enemies, especially those difficult, painful emotions, which most people often characterize as bad emotions. And and I'm going to explore how can you understand the whole scope of your emotions as we talk about what does it mean to develop a rich emotional landscape for your life so that you can really walk with a greater sense of confidence, a greater sense of assurance, a greater sense that, gosh, my life does have meaning and purpose. I may be going through a difficult time right now, but this experience, this circumstance, it certainly doesn't define me. And as I persevere and as I get through it, I will move on to better times. And so one thing to understand about developing a rich emotional landscape for your life, I want you to really think of it in those landscape terms. A few weeks ago, my wife and I had a chance to go up to Paso Robles, which is wine country in Central California. We went up with really good friends of ours. We had about 3 days just getting off for some vacation. I wrote about it on the Grove blog. Just was driving through the most beautiful, vivid countryside. We drove up the coast past Santa Barbara, looking at beautiful ocean. We went inland, the beautiful hills of Central California, the vineyards, the oak trees. That is a picture of the different landscapes we passed along the way in our journey to get up to Paso Robles. Well, at the same time, in your life, you are going to go through different landscapes, different seasons, and the more that you can familiarize yourself and really be okay with those seasons, you're going to get through those emotionally in a much better way. You know, here at the Grove, we're so committed to an artist's spiritual growth and creative growth. And so that's why we want to look at the whole person. What does it mean in all of our lives to develop our spiritual, our emotional, our relational, our artistic gifts, our intellectual capacity? How can we really become whole people? And that's why we need to be familiar with, okay, in my heart, in my mind, what are those emotions that I keep coming back to pretty much on a regular basis? And again, if you're just listening in now, we're talking about what it means to develop a rich emotional landscape in your life so that in your creative work, all that passion and energy, the good emotions, the difficult emotions really come forward into your life. Because what I don't want to do is paint a picture of, hey, everything has to be happy, clappy all the time, because that's just not realistic. And we don't live that way. I have my difficult days, you have your difficult days. And for whatever you're going through right now today, my hope is to give you hope today, because I don't know how you feel. I don't know your circumstances. I don't know what you're going through right now. But I can say, as you learn to understand your emotions, what's going on in your heart, what a whole heart looks like to you, what a broken heart looks like to you, you're going to be able to navigate these different landscapes that you travel through over the course of your life. So let me ask you a few questions. The first one I ask you to consider is this idea. What are the emotions that you commonly experience throughout the day? And that seems like such a simple, simplistic question, but there are people who live completely from their head, and they don't live from their heart. And God has given us both a head and a heart, and there's to be integration between the two of those things. But there's many people that look at life from just a purely intellectual perspective, and they're really not in touch with their emotions, so that when conflict comes, perhaps there's a death in the family, or a job loss, or a big setback, they don't know what to do with the difficulty of those emotions, nor do they know how to communicate those. Really good friend of mine, he was raised in a home where his mother had a lot of mental illness. So what would be normal and natural for many families to talk about the emotions in their home, to deal with conflicts as they came up, the home he grew up in was completely void of learning how to deal with emotions. And by his own admission, he grew up as an Iceman. He he was really locked up for a number of years because he just didn't understand what to do with difficult emotions. So again, the primary question I want to ask you is, what are the key emotions that you deal with throughout your day, and are you aware of them? The next question is the flip side of that. What are the emotions that you tend to avoid? What are the emotions that you tend to suppress, or you don't know what to deal with? How do you handle the difficult emotions of fear, anxiety, worry, stress? Stress basically is just a fear of loss. Stress is this pressure put on us. Either we put it on ourselves or outside circumstances bear down on us. And stress just creates this pressure that things are going to implode around us. And we have varying degrees of stress in our life. But whenever we're stressed, that really indicates what's going on in our heart. So what are the emotions that you tend to avoid or wrestle with the most? Because I want you to picture a steam kettle. And if you took a steam kettle, you're making some tea, you put that on a gas stove, you turn on the stove, and pretty soon that steam kettle is going to heat up, and it's going to produce all this energy, and pretty soon it's going to make a nice whistle to let you know that your water's ready for tea. Well, imagine this. Imagine taking a cork and putting it in that steam kettle and waiting for a few more minutes. Well, we all know what would happen. You put a cork in a steam kettle, and pretty soon that cork is going to blow, or the tea kettle is going to blow up. Well, the same thing is true with our emotions. We need to understand the difficult emotions that we live with, because if we don't understand how those emotions play a role in our life, they're going to get pent up in our heart and life. And so much fear and mental illness and even physical illness is tied to the unfinished business of emotions that are never dealt with. And so it's really critical, if you've had ongoing health issues or chronic pain issues. Some of you know my story of dealing with chronic pain for about 10 years when I was in my 30s. Had real severe chronic pain. It ended up leading to depression and a whole pitfall of problems related to that. But if you are dealing with ongoing health issues, one area worth exploring is your emotional life, because there may be things that you may not be seeing or avoiding that are really contributing to that physical pain or ongoing chronic issues. So when we avoid the deeper emotional issues in our lives, those emotions are still there, and they're creating energy just like the steam in the steam kettle. So we really need to pay attention to, how am I dealing with worry? How am I dealing with fear? How am I dealing with depression? Specifically depression as it relates to our hearts and lives. Therapists, counselors, a lot of writers have talked about that. A lot of depression is anger turned inward, okay? Where there's things that have been unresolved in our past, and we're just not willing to look at it. We're upset, we're angry about it, but we don't know how to deal with it, so we turn into ourselves, and the result is our demeanor, our personality. We experience depression. For some people, that's a cause of depression. Other people have more of a chemical imbalance, and that's where medication may be helpful or useful. And so, regardless of the emotion that you're dealing with, the first place to really get a handle on what does it mean to develop a rich emotional landscape for my life so I can be a whole person is really just kind of doing a personal inventory, looking at, hey, what are those emotions that I deal with on a regular basis? What are the ones that I avoid? Going back to this, why do I do that? The book really talked about a lot of really interesting defense mechanisms that we use to deal with difficult emotions. And the author points out, his name's Joseph Burgo, that oftentimes it's the homes that we were raised in where we really learned what was safe, what was not, what emotions were okay, what were not. Many of you have posted to me or sent me emails or posted things here on the Grove comments section, different homes that you were raised in and different messages that you received from your mom or your dad about your art, your life. And so all of those have an emotional impact on us. If you're just listening in now, I want to encourage you to tell me where you're from, leave a post, a comment. Would love to hear from you. And we're talking about what does it mean to cultivate a rich emotional landscape for your life. So let me ask you this question. After we look at, okay, what are the emotions that we deal with on a regular basis? What are the ones that we avoid? If you were to give me a picture of what the emotional landscape of your life commonly looks like, what would you say? Would you say, okay, when I look at the emotional landscape of my life, it looks like a series of mountains, and they're beautiful mountains. I have real high peaks, but again, there's the valleys, the ups and downs. Maybe mountains are a good picture of what your emotional landscape looks like. For some of you, you might say a desert, where the emotional landscape of my life looks pretty bleak. I wrestle with isolation. I wrestle with loneliness. I feel often alone, especially for a lot of artists who create their art alone. I'm a writer. I spend most of my day at this keyboard writing away. Hi, Sherry Moore from Texas. Thanks for hopping in. So we're talking about our emotions and what's the landscape. So some of you may feel like you're in a desert or an extremely dry period creative in your life, or maybe some of you are feeling like you're in a dry period in your relationship with God. Others of you may look at the landscape of your life and see kind of just the country. You see a lot of green, you see things growing. Yeah, there may be weeds here and there, things that need tending, things that may need work. I think my wife, the one that I'm married to, her name's Krista, she's pretty much country. There's green a lot of times. She's real steady. She's real stable. She's not real high, not real low. I think in our marriage, in our relationship, I'm probably more the complex model who wrestles with emotions based upon a number of things that I've been through. And as I noted in the Grove blog that I posted yesterday, I did talk about how 3 very common emotions throughout the course of my life, particularly in my adult years, have been fear and anxiety and fear, anxiety, I forget what the third one was, but those have been very common to my experience. And so I've really learned not to make fear and anxiety my enemies, but really come to understand them and learn, hey, that's part of my emotional landscape. And so when I look over the course of my life, I can see a landscape that, probably pretty much like a country. I see fertile ground. I see trees that are alive and growing. I see dead trees that need to be, either cut down or pruned. Hey, John, good to hear from you, buddy. We're talking about cultivating a rich emotional landscape, and I'm kind of talking about the landscape of my emotional life and how important it is for us to understand and really give ourselves permission to understand the different emotions that we go through over the course of our lives. So again, I've talked about emotional landscapes of mountains. I've talked about deserts. I've talked about country. Maybe a landscape that you identify with. Maybe you love the ocean and you love standing on the shore, looking at the wind and the waves, and maybe that the beach scene is a landscape common to your emotions. Beaches along the coast here in California, we get a lot of rocky territory in Laguna Beach, but then long stretches of really wide open sand. Other times the waves are real big. And so I think sometimes a visual metaphor can really help ground us to understand our emotional life more. Maybe your emotional landscape is a garden. Maybe you love gardens, and you see fruit, you see flowers. Yeah, you see the bugs that tend to eat away those things. But whatever picture works for you in understanding how do I develop a richer emotional landscape for my life. It's really important to have these handholds to get a context of understanding, hey, throughout the course of the day, how am I dealing with my emotions? What's my mood? So, more questions I've got for you. What emotions consume your energy? I know when I'm grateful and when I'm thankful, when I have a sense that things are in place, I'm in a good rhythm in my life, I'm in a great mood, and I've got really good energy, really good momentum. I'm motivated to go meet with people throughout the day. I'm motivated to do my work. I'm grateful to be with my family in the evening. But, through the course of the day, I'm thinking about, okay, where is my emotional energy going? What am I giving energy to? Now, at the same time, what difficult emotions consume your energy? And for me personally, if there's one situation that consumes my energy and drains me quicker than anything else, and you might find this common to your experience, it's anything related to just heavy conflict that goes on and on and on again. So you're going to have conflicts and circumstances and stresses throughout the day, and a lot of times those are one and done. But when there is sustained, heavy relational conflict, that becomes really draining for me. Last year, with some different projects I was involved with and some family personal issues, there was some ongoing conflict that just didn't seem to let up, and I just felt it drain on my emotions. So using the beach landscape analogy, I felt like I was just in the surf, just getting hammered by one wave after another, and I just found that really draining. Well, again, it's important to know what types of circumstances or situations drain your emotional energy, because then that's going to input your creative work, whether you're a musician like my buddy John, and if you're a writer, if you're a filmmaker, if you're painting, especially if you've got a deadline, you really have to assess what are the emotions that are consuming my energy, what's getting the best of me, because you want to start each day with as much game and energy as you can. And we only have a cup. Each day we get a cup of emotional energy, and that's going to go up and down throughout the day. And so we have to assess, where are we at, because we don't want to arrive at the point in our life where we feel like we're just running on emotional fumes all the time. And when that goes on for days and weeks and months, then the other physical and mental issues that I mentioned earlier can really come into play, because we're just drained. So let me ask you another question. When you face a circumstance or a situation, how do you deal with conflict? And if you're going to get triggered in any type of situation where you feel threatened, you can bet that you're going to have a 5-alarm siren going on in your heart and mind. A lot of times this happens subconsciously, we're not aware of it. But when we have any type of emotional outburst, or when we shut down emotionally, it's usually because there has been a situation, a circumstance where we've been triggered. It's hit a wounded, unresolved issue in our life, and that's why we have this big outburst, or why we withdraw and hunker down. Really important to understand, how do I deal with conflicting emotions? Because those emotions don't go away until we deal with them. And if you and I want to become whole people, living with a sense of purpose and meaning and energy for our life, for our vocation, our work, we really need to understand, how do I handle conflict? How do I stand up under intense pressure when things aren't going my way? So I'm going to, over the next couple minutes here, I am going to wrap up. We've been talking for some time now, and I do want to tell you about a couple things coming up with the Grove. But let me wrap up with some practical ideas and strategies. One, I hope you found this conversation. I know we're at the tip of the iceberg, but I hope that you have found it helpful as you explore what does it mean for me to have a rich emotional landscape in my life versus just I want to be happy. So let me give you some practical strategies. First off, ask yourself, do I live out of my head or do I live out of my heart? If I had to say, okay, 80-20, I'm mostly in my head, or 80% I'm mostly in my heart, and my emotions seem to run my life. They seem to overwhelm me. What's that balance for you? Do you live out of your head and heart? Because if we're really going to become whole people, we need to access everything God has given us: our body, our soul, our heart, our emotions, our mind, because that's the path of wholeness. And so ask yourself, do I live out of my head and my heart? Next, who do you have to go to bring your whole heart, your emotions, the thoughts you wrestle with? Who do you have to bring those things to? Who are the really great, safe, wonderful friends and people that you have in your life? Because you and I are not meant to do this life isolated and alone. And I really want to encourage you, in some ways, how can you, in a relationship, whether it's with a best friend, whether it's a group of men that you meet with or a group of women, who are the people in your life that encourage you, who listen to you without judgment? They give you support. They may tell you the truth and give you grace and truth to really balance some things that we need to hear. But we have to have what I call foxhole friends, so that when the bombs are dropping all around us and we're dealing with difficult circumstances, different problems in our lives, that we have friends that we can count on. So bringing those things into community is so important. And if you don't have that in your life, perhaps a therapist, a counselor, a pastor, a priest, somebody that you can go to, that you can confide in, so that you can learn to navigate these difficult emotions and cultivate a deeper, richer emotional life. I've often said that, we are not bulletproof. We are human. Things do hurt us, and we just can't take 1,000 bullets and just kind of think we're going to bounce back at some time. And the more that we have community and people to help us walk through those difficult seasons, then when they're going through a difficult season and we're doing well, we're going to be there for them. And that's really the beauty of community. Next, really encourage you, if you haven't spent much time in the Bible or much time in Scripture, the Psalms are a wonderful place to look at the whole canopy emotions, the whole palette of emotions that God has given us. Because a lot of times people think it's unspiritual if I'm angry, or it's unspiritual if I'm depressed, or I should be through this by now. We put all sorts of pressure and kind of misbeliefs in their heart and mind. But if you look at Psalms and you look at the biblical characters throughout history, they're just a broken, messed up bunch of people that God decides to love and use anyway. So in the Psalms, you'll see David pouring out his heart, his mind, his emotions, everything in him, and just having a really honest conversations, because I think that's the core, and that's where I really want to wrap up today, is it's really healthy, it's really important that we're honest with ourselves, that we're honest with people in our life, what our heart and mind is going through, and what these emotions are doing in our lives, things that we're grateful for, things that we're happy for, things that we wrestle with, that we struggle with, because through that we become more authentic people. We become the people that God has designed us to be, His sons, His daughters. And God, if we just think of that rich place of the Garden of Eden and what an incredible physical landscape that is, I think it gives us a great picture of what it might mean to cultivate a rich emotional landscape for our lives, so that we can really enjoy everything that God has for us and all the relationships in our life. So with that, I'm going to wrap up with a couple thoughts, and I hope that you will leave a comment. If you've enjoyed this, I encourage you to share it with a friend. You can go on the Grove website at www.thegrovecenter.org. You can look at all of our Facebook Live episodes. You can leave comments there. I am going to put a link on right now. If you have not grabbed a copy of Cultivating Your Spiritual Life and Your Creative Work, it's a free mini video course that the Grove offers. We've got other free resources on our website. Hope that you'll grab it. We also have our Cultivated Artist Experience. We're accepting applications for that now. The Cultivated Artist Experience is a one-year experience journeying with about 10 to 15 other artists. We meet 4 times a year. There's information on our website, but it's a great experience in cultivating your spiritual life and your creative work. I hope this information, this conversation has been encouraging to you today. Thanks so much. Drop us a note. God bless, and thanks for listening today. Bye now.